We are in Daniel. Welcome, everyone. As I just said, we are at a point in this study where we have this week, next week, and the next week, and then I basically I'm spent on the Old Testament. Okay, not that we couldn't do more. We didn't do Jeremiah. We didn't do some of the wisdom literature. I've probably only shown you like 3 Proverbs in this entire class. We could have done Proverbs. We could have done Job. That would have been a lot of fun. We've been mostly keeping to the main thrust of the story of the Bible, the narrative section, and then we could have spent more time in the Psalms. The Bible is especially the Old Testament, is a thick section of literature, right? And so, yeah, we're headed towards the back of the book at this point, because when we get to the New Testament, it's really like the last third. So, with all of that to say, welcome to essentially the end of the Old Testament story. There's one aspect of the Old Testament that comes after Daniel, and that's going to be the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah. That's when they are headed back. They're shorter books, but just some historical accounting of the time when, after the decree that the Jews should be released from captivity and sent back into their ancient homeland, that's what Ezra and Nehemiah are about. And then it's like, there's some prophets. We will, in the last week of the Old Testament, I'll show you stuff from Micah, Malachi, Zechariah. We'll do like a quick compilation of some really essential key passages to look at before we get into the New Testament. Once we get into the New Testament era, after our potluck, we'll have 3 prep meetings. 3 prep meetings. Prep meeting number 1, introduction to the first century. So meaning there's 400 years of gap in the history between the end of the Old Testament and Ezra and Nehemiah storyline, and then when you land on the first page of the New Testament with Jesus. Now, it's not that we don't know that history, it's just your Bible doesn't know that history, in the sense that you can't open it up and find it unless you have some of the Apocrypha. Okay? So what we need to do is we need to fill in that gap of 400 years for your understanding. So introduction to the world of the New Testament. The rise of the Roman Empire, the rise of Greece, the rise of Hellenism, the rise of pagan, Greek philosophy, the rise of so many things that happen in that little, break of 400 years. So we'll do that. Second week will be, I'm going to try to do my best in 2 hours to give you the best Trinity presentation that I can give in 2 hours, okay? We can go forever on that. That's nature of God stuff. And, there's so many different routes. There's like, we could do a route which is just like, let's just carve a path through the scriptures to show you from the scriptures these concepts. I can show you what later church fathers said and how they worked out these ideas. I'm not going to do that, though. I'm going to just try to do a little bit of everything, if that makes sense. Okay? And try to give you as much as I can in 2 hours on the Trinity, so that when we get to the revelation of Jesus, you understand what did the Old Testament have to say about the nature of God and how that relates to the incarnation. And how those ideas were worked out over time and stuff like that. So
is that after the 24th?
After. Okay. Yeah. So the 31st.
That would be the first meeting.
The first meeting after would be the intro to the New Testament world. Second meeting would be overview of Trinitarian theology. Okay. Doing our best to do that in 2 hours. If you guys like that so much, maybe we could extend that. I don't know. You know what I mean? But then the third and final week before we actually open the New Testament will be introduction to the New Testament. Okay? Because the introduction to first century New Testament world is a little bit different than introduction to what is the New Testament made up of and what are the things to look out for. And I was just going to do that as a third week, if that makes sense. Does that sound good? Is that a good path? When we get into the Gospels, and you'll probably hear me say this multiple times, when we get into the Gospels, we're not going to go like Matthew, then Mark, then Luke, then John. We'll probably hop between them just to sort of give like a general story of the ministry and work of Jesus prior to them. Yeah, I know, right? I guess I'm just saying, yeah, we'll probably jump around a little bit. We'll like the first meeting, we'll do like a few chapters in Luke and then maybe John 1 together, things like that. I don't know. I'm forgetting how I outlined it. So that's our roadmap. How does that sound? Good roadmap? Yeah. once we get into the New Testament, I think, yeah, we have like, we still have like another, this is meeting 46. I think the meetings end in the 90s. Okay, so we are still about halfway. And since I'm talking schedule, last year I did 2 meetings on church history, if you guys remember. I'll probably extend that too, and we'll do multiple bonus meetings. That's like, we've closed the Bible, but if you guys want to know, church history is another favorite subject of mine, so that would be fun. Yeah, bonus. So I call them bonus meetings. Anyway, does that sound good, guys? Okay, so just as a reminder, I'm going to be introducing the book of Daniel now. We, in the Old Testament, again, this sort of represents the Old Testament here. We're at the end. I keep saying this, we're at the end. And last time we looked at Ezekiel. Ezekiel was a book that had sort of a diversity of genre. The diversity of genre in Ezekiel was prophecy and apocalyptic literature, right? The sections of Ezekiel that are prophecy are where it's like the Lord says this, the Lord says this is what's going to happen. The parts of Ezekiel that are apocalyptic, what is the mark of apocalyptic literature? It's visionary, right? It's a revelation of a vision. So in the times in which we were in Ezekiel and it was like, and I saw this, and then I heard this, that is where we have some apocalyptic literature. Now that we get into Daniel, we're also going to have sort of a blend of 2 genres. Daniel also is apocalyptic literature. In some respects, certain chapters of Daniel are apocalyptic in nature, while other chapters of Daniel read more like the historical accounts of the kings or 1st and 2nd Samuel. So it's telling the story about this small group of Jewish people within Babylon, Daniel being the main character, and then it's going to talk about some dreams that he has. And well, even in the narrative sections of Daniel, as it's describing dreams, of course, those dreams are apocalyptic in nature. Once you get to the back half of Daniel, it gets very apocalyptic. And again, apocalyptic meaning it's about a visionary experience. You know, Daniel is visited by Gabriel multiple times and things like that. And so with that, it's sort of going to be divided in mainly doing narrative sections this week. And then next week will be more of the apocalyptic. We have a couple dreams to look at this week, but more so next week. How does that sound? Good.
Great.
Sounds great. So where are we in the narrative? In the narrative, we are in the exile, right? And you guys know this, so I don't need to cover it. But remember that King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon besieged Jerusalem, took captives back to Babylon, and this was his way of asserting the Babylonian Empire in the world. And so Judah falls prey to King Nebuchadnezzar, who's going to be a figure we're going to be looking at today. This, of course, represents the fall of humanity generally, that in Genesis 1-11, we have the creation of humanity, the establishment of priests in the garden. They sin, they get cast from the garden, and then humanity builds and founds Babylon in Genesis chapter 11, right prior to when Abraham was called out. Do you guys remember that? And so now we have, again, the story of the Old Testament was the creation of the people of Israel, the priesthood, the kingdom of priests. They sin, they worship other gods. They're sent into Babylon. And what does Babylon represent? Babylon is almost its own character in the Bible in some respects. And so I want to reintroduce you to Babylon a little bit so that you can sort of get to know what we're talking about. What is Babylon like? Sorry? Empire, yes. Okay. Empire in the bad sense, right? So when you have, God's kingdom is also an empire, but this is empire in the human sense, right? Empire in the sense of, if you are familiar with something like Star Wars, right? The big bad empire run by the emperor, king of the dark side, Same thing, think of Mordor, like this represents this evil totalitarian state. What's interesting though is it's not like Babylon has lava rivers, like Mordor. It's tricky because it looks prosperous, it looks beautiful, but it's the exaltation of human glory that leads to human suffering, mostly that's what you should be getting from that. And so we're in this decadent society that is filthy rich and conquering all these nations, but yet it is considered through the eyes of the prophets an evil place, right? So in that way, more like the Star Wars Empire than it is like Mordor. But anyway, if that makes sense. But yes, it's a one in Genesis 11 and 12, excuse me, 10 and 11. It's what's considered a one tongue empire. What does that mean? It means it said all of the world had one language and one voice, or one tongue, right? Meaning that they centralize their authority, and therefore they say there's nothing that we can't do. We can make a name for ourselves if we just banded together in the unity of human exaltation. There's nothing we can't do. The plan and purpose of God is to do what in response to that? What does he do? He separates, he divides. Yes, he says, no, the goal is for you to be fruitful and multiply, to grow in your different expressions of the image of God, to spread over the whole earth, except you are now centralizing and building this technocracy, right? They use bricks. Remember, we talked all the way back in Genesis chapter 11. They use these bricks, which represents technology, these bricks to build an artificial mountain, a tower, which gives humanity the power to bring down the powers, bring down the gods, so that they can harness that power and continue to ascend humanity by their own power. If you guys remember all the way back, so many meetings ago, we went through Genesis 11, but go back and listen to that. What's the central image of definition for Babylon is the ziggurat, right? The great tower of Babylon. Ziggurats are pretty standard within the ancient world. Of course, Babylon has this magnificent ziggurat, but ancient cultures, they would build these staircases, which represent their access to the gods and the powers of heaven, right? It's a little bit more like a super temple than anything else. It's this idea that we create this space in which it's almost like a train stop for the powers, right? And if we do the right rituals up in this space, we're creating essentially a return to Eden by our own power. We're making a name for ourselves. One of the most lasting and notable constructions of the ancient world are these tower temples called ziggurats. Civilizations around the world have each continued to build ziggurats, from ancient Mesopotamia to even South America, right? These are like pretty commonly seen across the world. For ancient cultures, the ziggurat temples localized worship of the gods as a necessary part of any thriving civilization. They economized idol worship and made it a part of societal structure. They are at the center of ancient culture as the place where the unseen meets the seen. How are they different from a temple? How are they different from the temple in Jerusalem? Again, they represent human power and might to build a technological means by which we are able to access and ascend. If you know anything about modern transhumanism, does anyone know anything about modern transhumanism? If you've heard Elon Musk or anyone else say AI is going to make us immortal, right? That's a version of this that we're talking. That's more of a modern version of what the tower temple of the ziggurat represents, right? Or the Tower of Babel. If you want more on this, go back to that meeting. But this was the founding of Babylon. Babel is the short form or more ancient rendering of Babylon. We know this because, again, it even in Genesis 11 describes the same location, the plain of Shinar. They set up the ziggurat of Babel. Okay, and so now we're going back to Babylon. In the story of the Tower of Babel, humanity attempts to use technological advancement to harness divine power. Their efforts are thwarted when the Creator brings down confusion and disillusion upon their efforts, and they are scattered in a targeted disunification, resulting in the formation of nations. The story of Babel ends at Pentecost, and we'll get into that, but the idea is God wants to relocate this centralization of human authority and exaltation. He wants to scatter them, but bring them back in a kingdom that he sets up himself. And that's part of what we're talking about today, is the throwing down of corrupt human kingdoms and the raising up, or you could say the bringing down also, of the kingdom of God. So Babylon in the Bible becomes this universal term to represent humanity's centralized and systematic evil. Centralized and systematic evil. So Babylon, Egypt, Sodom and Gomorrah, the empire of Rome, right? They're conglomerated spiritually within the Bible, right? So this is Revelation chapter 11, verse 7 through 9. This is the two martyrs who are the two witnesses who are killed, right? And he says when they finish their testimony, the beast that comes up from the abyss, This is apocalyptic literature, so we'll get into that when we get into Revelation. Will overpower them and kill them. Their bodies will lie in the public square of the great city. The great city would be Babylon, later called Babylon in Revelation, the great city, which is figuratively Sodom and Egypt, where their Lord was crucified. So even corrupt Jerusalem, the city of peace, the holy city, can be called Babylon, right? The Pharisaical system that appeals to the Roman Empire to get the justification to murder Jesus in the streets, it can be called Babylon, right? So Babylon is a spiritual kingdom of darkness. That's the most real version of Babylon, is a spiritual kingdom of darkness that is anti-God and ultimately exalting of human power and authority. Hey guys, come on in. That's all right. Welcome, welcome. There's 2 seats over there. Back in Isaiah also, if you guys remember, who did Isaiah liken the king of Babylon to? He drew a connection between the king of Babylon and said, hey, you're like this figure. You're like the devil, right? You're like the Satan. You are Lucifer, if you guys remember. So it is totally fitting that Isaiah, back in Isaiah chapter 14, uses an analogy for a rebel spirit in the heavenly realm to pronounce judgment upon the king of Babylon. So all the way back in Isaiah, there's this judgment prophecies that come upon the city of Babylon, the actual objective city. But then the writer Isaiah likens the king of Babylon to this fallen star, if you guys remember. So this connection, king of Babylon, there's a spiritual Babylon, there's a spiritual power and at rule and authority in this heavenly sense that is manifest in evil earthly kingdoms. So we, in some respects, live in Babylon today, right? We live in nations that are dark, that do evil things. I bring up like my conspiracy brain multiple times, but if you read CIA documents, if you read about MK Ultra, if you read about what the government is willing to do for the sake of American power and glory, right? That would be something like Nebuchadnezzar. That would be something like, building a name for ourselves, becoming the greatest and best, and we will subvert the authority of God. We will subvert our capacity to understand what is ethical and moral and right. We'll do away with that for the sake of vainglory, right? Well, yeah, it's not a conspiracy theory. I feel like I mention Jeffrey Epstein in the CIA and stuff. I do that fairly frequently. So if you've watched, I don't want to say anything.
That's just the stuff we know about.
Yeah, I know. That's the thing. And it's not just America. I'm just saying that because we're here. That is going to be India, China, any nation that is, again, the whole point is the all power and glory goes to the government, right? To the human governments so that they can essentially ascend and become the best that they can be. All of that centralization of power and authority ultimately results in Babylon. Babylon, again, represents the systematized reality of wickedness and darkness that reigns in the world, right? You can think of something like, someone mentioned something like Las Vegas. Everyone knows that Las Vegas is a place of darkness, right? Where darkness is, you could say it's in the air. It's sort of the spirit of the power of the air in Las Vegas. And then that underground, there's probably tons of human trafficking and drug rings and crime lords. And that's Babylon, guys. Does that make sense? And it's all in the name of sort of this prosperity and this greatness, right? That these things are allowed to take place. It's not a moral society. It's a society that is hell-bent, literally, hell-bent on developing human power and might and authority, the ascension of humanity through whatever means possible. That's what Babylon represents. Does that make sense? Yep.
We right now in the world kind of entering into that with the war,
Yeah, right.
Then with China and Russia, you can start to see the foreplay of the nations kind of speaking their opinion about America. And
This gets into Revelation and the idea of the super beast, which is sort of the amalgamation of all of the kingdoms into one. Whenever people talk about one world government being somehow tied to the return of Jesus end time, stuff like that, they're often pulling on this idea. Do you have something?
after you're done making that point.
I'm done. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So we hear about the Tower of Babel as kids, and we hear stories, and we read about it, and it's so oversimplified.
Yes.
But it was such a huge critical point. So they must have been on the verge of something
Right.
extraordinary.
Yep.
To get to the point where God actually had to disperse the languages and confuse everything and push everybody aside. I correlate it to the internet now has reunified the world in the way that it was during that time.
Yeah.
I wonder what it was specifically that got to the point where God said, okay, that's it. They need to be dispersed.
Mm-hmm.
And how is that related to now?
We can't get
For
along.
the first time in world history, we've been unified to a point where it's only a click away to be able to communicate with anybody on the same language,
Right.
and bring all those brains back together to get to whatever they were getting to before.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, we find cultural fragmentation in today's world too. So it's like,
To an element,
yeah,
they still have. I mean, there's Bedouins in the Middle East
right.
on the internet talking to people in the States. Like, there's no disconnect.
That's right.
And what then could we be looking at in the future that
Mhm.
God is keeping
Mhm.
the world from, and how closer do we to
Yeah.
getting to the same exact point?
That's
Like,
right.
You can't oversimplify something that extraordinary. Like,
Absolutely.
it was so huge and significant. He destroyed communication throughout the world
Right.
to cause that separation.
I know. Yeah, it's spooky. It's spooky. It's spooky, especially because as you're getting at, we live in a Babylonian age for sure, Tower of Babel age. So one of my favorite books, and I say this too many times, is a book called That Hideous Strength by C.S. Lewis. It's a fictional account of the modern day and it mirrors the Tower of Babel story, Genesis chapter 11. That Hideous Strength. It's a hard read. So I'll just say that, but it's a good read. So, yeah.
So is there anything, Josephus or
Mm.
any other historians that describe more about what
Recount the Tower of Babel?
The Tower of Babel, like what it was that they were.
Josephus might, but he lives so far after that he would be speculating on other traditional legends or things like
I
that.
don't know any historian of that time.
No, I mean, that's just so far back. That would be prior even to Abraham. So, and Abraham's 4,000 years old.
Old scrolls.
That's really old. That would be some sort of cuneiform thing.
Maybe we're not supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the limits of human literature going back that far. So for sure.
And now we have AI, so you can't
Yes.
even tell what's real and what's
AI is one of these things where, again, it's very spooky, especially when you hear AI, people who create AI, they say that, the god of the religions of the past does not exist, but we are creating the true God that will exist. Spooky.
The point of us knowing that that's in our Bible, preserved
Mm.
by the Spirit, is to recognize that God knows what He's doing. He still does.
Yes.
It's like at Babel, He knows what's in our minds,
Right.
the minds of His creatures.
Yep.
And what He's going to do about it. So I think that's
Good word. So yeah, that's excellent. Particularly because the book of Daniel is all about the fact that the people of God now their holy city, the city of peace, Jerusalem, has been completely burned down and destroyed, and their temple destroyed. And it's like, wait, God, we were supposed to be the subversion of Babylon in the world. We were supposed to be a kingdom of priests on your behalf, following the law, following the commandments, being a moral, just society, reigning in peace and shalom. And yet now we're in Babylon. Now the city has won. The city of darkness won, it feels like. But Daniel and his friends are the ones who, number one, say, we will not defile ourselves even though we're here. We're not going to give up. And number two, are granted dreams and visions, and Nebuchadnezzar himself is granted dreams and visions to say, it looks good now for you, but you have no idea what God is doing. Here, let me reveal to you what God is doing in the midst of this, okay? So take heart in that. The story of Daniel is about hope in the face of, again, the beast of the world bearing down on you, okay? That's what Babylon is. And of course, Babylon is an ancient city of the world. But again, Babylon, the ancient city of the world, becomes this picture, this type of the great spiritual kingdom of darkness that is found, that sets up shop on every continent of the world at different points in history. More so increasingly, it seems. So anyway, does that make sense, guys? Of course, here are some of the ruins of ancient Babylon. Saddam Hussein saw himself as the reincarnation of Nebuchadnezzar. Can't get into that, but he did. So anyway, with the apostasy of Judah, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the exile of the elect back into Babylon, it looks as though the dark kingdom of this world has actually won. From a human perspective, from the perspective of those on the ground, they think, man, what now? Humanity is left up to its own devices. They're going to build a kingdom of darkness and the world is just going to go to hell, literally, right? And yet, while in Babylon, Daniel the prophet received some of the most crucial and imminent prophecies about the still coming Messiah, the king in the house of David, the one who once and for all will crush the head of the serpent, the son of Eve, right? But before Daniel, we need to get into a passage in Jeremiah. So everyone open to Jeremiah 29. Jeremiah 29, okay? And if you watched the poem that I sent, we're going to be talking a little bit about that now. Jeremiah 29. So Jeremiah is a prophet living during the time when people are going into exile, simultaneously with Daniel, right? So Daniel, Ezekiel, and Jeremiah are all contemporaries in the same way that, Peter, James, Paul, and John are all contemporaries, right? And this is what Jeremiah says. He's still in Jerusalem, but he's sending a letter to the exiles who have made it to Babylon. And it says, "These are the words of the letter that the prophet Jeremiah sent from Jerusalem to the remaining elders among the exiles and to the priests, the prophets, and all the people whom Nebuchadnezzar had taken into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. This was after King Jeconiah and the queen mother, the court officials, the leaders of Judah and Jerusalem, the artisans, and the smiths had departed from Jerusalem. The letter was sent by the hand of Elasah, son of Shaphan, and Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, whom King Zedekiah of Judah sent to Babylon to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And Jeremiah's letter said this: Thus says Yahweh of armies, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. This is what God says. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there. Do not decrease. Seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to Yahweh on its behalf. For in its welfare, you will find your welfare. For thus says Yahweh of armies, the God of Israel, do not let the prophets and the diviners who are among you deceive you. Do not listen to their dreams that they dream, for it is a lie that they are prophesying to you in my name. I did not send them, says Yahweh. And we're just going to stop there. That's the little section of the letter. So what does God say to Israel while they are in the kingdom of darkness? What should they do? How should they respond? Be fruitful. Be fruitful and multiply. Seek the peace of the city. Seek the peace of the city. Do not dwindle away. Do not give up hope, right? It's this really incredible subversion of what you would expect a people to do when they have been sent into the land of darkness. God says, what's actually going on here is me allowing you to undergo exile for your own sin. Partly is so that you can go plant sunflowers, right? And that's what was so great about that poem is, it was the heart of that poem came from Jeremiah 29 clearly. The idea of go plant gardens in the city of darkness, okay? Go build houses, go get married. So what are you supposed to do in Babylon? Build houses, plant gardens, get married. Right? And Jeremiah 29 becomes a very significant principle. Again, I've talked about Babylon as a spiritual reality that is present at all times. We are supposed to see ourselves as in some way simultaneously living in the kingdom of God of heaven and also bodily living in the powers of spiritual darkness on the earth, right? Or living in the midst of them. And what are we to do in response? Build houses, plant gardens, be fruitful and multiply. This is the biblical prescription, God's prescription for what do you do when you feel like everything around you is dark? What do you do when you feel like the world and the culture is at war with you? What do you do when you feel like, man, this world, it's going to hell? We should flee to the hills and we should stock up on rations and we should buy a bunch of shotguns. No, we should not do that. Seek the peace of the city. Right? Sorry?
Increase your number.
Increase your numbers, yeah. Have babies. Plant gardens, plant seeds. How are the people of God charged to respond to them being in the land of darkness? They're supposed to see it as they are able to plant outposts of heaven, okay? That's what the church represents in many respects. We'll get more into this, but the main points of Jeremiah 29, in the Babylonian exile, the Judeans are to plant gardens, meaning they are to operate with a prosperous future in mind for that land, for that kingdom of darkness, that God will transform through our submissive persecution, through our being in the land, even though it's hard for us, even though it's a cross for us. God has called us to that land and we are to plant gardens, plant seeds. God tells the Judeans, by the way, I'm saying Judeans. What is the short form of Judean? Jew, yeah. So even in the New Testament, when you read the Jews, King of the Jews, it really is just King of the Judeans, right? God tells, or Yehudeans, I think would be the right pronunciation. God tells the Judeans to seek the good of the city in spite of the fact that it was that very kingdom that came and stole them away from their own land, destroying everything that they loved and hold dear, right? God announces that, we didn't get into it. Did we get into it? The 70 years? Well, I'm not going to go back to it, but he also says that 29:11. Let's just go back to it. Jeremiah 29:11. We have to read that. Come on, we can't not do that, okay? Let's find it. Where is it? Because I don't have the...
It's over 10.
I don't have the things. Bear sons, seek the welfare, do not let the prophet... Okay. For thus says Yahweh, only when Babylon's 70 years are completed will I visit you, and I will fulfill my promise to you and bring you back to this place, meaning Jerusalem. So 70 years, he says, are you going to spend in Babylon, right? So you could essentially say almost 2 generations if a generation is 40 years in the Bible, right? For surely, this is the famous passage, surely I know the plans that I have for you, says Yahweh, plans for your welfare and not for harm, to give you a future and a hope. Then when you call upon me and come and pray to me, I will hear you. When you search for me, you will find me. If you seek me with all your heart, I will let you find me, says Yahweh, and I will restore your fortunes and gather you from all the nations, all the places where I have driven you, says Yahweh, and I will bring you back to the place from which I sent you into exile. That's where we'll stop. Okay, so again, this vision of hope that Jeremiah is giving to the people in exile, giving to Daniel. Just think about this. Daniel would have read this letter or heard this letter pronounced in Babylon. And this will be his charge, the thing that he takes to heart. I am a child who was stolen away from his father and mother, I'm reading into this, and taken into Babylon. What am I to do? How am I to respond? Do I become part of Babylon? Do I rebel against Babylon? No. The charge of God, seek the good of the city, and if I am faithful to that, then I know I will do well here. Okay? And this painting is really good. You can just see the city burning behind him. He's got like tears in his eyes, and he's writing, seek the good of the city. Seek the good of the city, okay? Of course, Jesus fulfills this principle when he says, You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I tell you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Jeremiah says, pray for the Babylonians, right? Pray for the city. Pray to me on their behalf, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. And again, bringing this all the way into the church era, Peter calls us foreigners and exiles, right? Dear friends, I urge you, foreigners and exiles, abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the Gentile pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day that he visits us. So this Jeremiah 29 should be, you could say it's the proto version of like the Sermon on the Mount in some respects. It's this kingdom manifesto, right? You were sent into the kingdom of darkness. While you are there, plant seeds of the kingdom of light. Make sense, guys? Good.
In but not of.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I should have brought that up as well. Be in the world, but not of the world, right? Your citizenship is in heaven, right? But you can live in the world, bringing good to that world. Okay? That makes sense. So in the book of Daniel, we have the exile of the people of God to Babylon. And in the book of Daniel, we are going to focus on 4 main figures on the Jewish side, the side of the Judeans, and then a couple kings. One of the kings is going to be Nebuchadnezzar and his son Belshazzar. That's going to be on the Babylonian side. These are sort of the main characters of the book of Daniel. Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. You guys should know this as
Meshach.
Shadrach.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Yeah, they're Babylonian names that are given to them. What is Daniel's Babylonian name? Belshazzar, which sounds eerily similar to Nebuchadnezzar's own son's name, right? Which should tell you something, I like to think should tell you something about the effect that Daniel has on Nebuchadnezzar, that he names his own son similarly to, or vice versa. The name of his God, yeah, that's right. Bel. It's something like Bel justifies me or something, or Bel protects me or something. So yeah, but we're going to focus mostly on Daniel, right? So Daniel the prophet. He's contemporary to Jeremiah and Ezekiel. He would have gone into Babylon as a very young man, and he lives most of his life in Babylon, okay? So that full 70 years, essentially, you could say, most of his time is spent in Babylon. Most of his life is. He's a master interpreter of dreams and visions. So he becomes the chief interpreter of things. It's like all of the enchanters and the astrologers and the magicians of Babylon are unable to interpret what Daniel is able to interpret. It's like, who else can do this for us? Who can solve the mystery? Yeah, we'll get into that. So when we did the whole meeting on Ezekiel, the Ezekiel 1 vision, that's going to be really important for you to remember that, because that shows up again in Daniel. And he is the one, this writer of the Son of Man version, whenever Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man, he's referring to a very specific vision in Daniel. That Daniel's vision becomes the bomb that is dropped on the Old Testament that says, like, here's the fullness. That vision is really the culmination of all of the Old Testament, I would say. And so he's the one who delivers that vision, that dream that he has. And then he is visited by Gabriel, the archangel, multiple times. And given a timeline, the angel says, here's how many years, essentially, before Messiah comes. And that played out in real history. We'll get into that into next week. So pretty cool. Yes, you said. There's a very similar figure in the Old Testament that, again, is very much like Daniel. Daniel is a repetition of this archetype figure of Joseph, this sufferer who goes down into a pit but is exalted on high as the chief of the pagan king, right? And at the right hand, and is exalted as this sort of figure who gives these essential visions. Yeah, so you should see Joseph in Daniel quite a bit. And I love the little lion there that he's sitting with because of the lion's den story. We're not getting into that this week. Okay, you guys ready? We have an hour to get through 5 chapters. I think we can do it. Okay?
They actually stole Daniel, didn't they? From
Right.
Bill, along with others. And they picked a perfect one.
Yeah, when we talk about the exile, we're talking about people who were forcibly relocated, meaning let's put some chains on you and we're going to march you off and then drop you here and you can become our, low income labor, that sort of idea. Does that make sense, guys? We're going to shut up your king in prison. I'm going to pull up something real fast. I was going to show you guys a clip and I just want to have it ready. Open to Daniel chapter 1. Is everyone already there? Okay, so Daniel chapter 1, I got the sound working. We're good. We got the door open. We got the air on. Let's do our reading now. Okay. You guys ready? Yeah. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Jehoiakim of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, his name is very long, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord gave King Jehoiakim of Judah into his power, as well as some of the vessels of the house of God. He brought them to the land of Shinar and placed the vessels in the treasury of his gods. Then the king commanded his palace master, Ashpenaz, to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and of the nobility, young men without physical defect and handsome, versed in every branch of wisdom, endowed with knowledge and insight, and competent to serve in the king's palace. They were taught the literature and language of the Chaldeans. Pause. Who are the Chaldeans? Or Chaldeans would be the... Got to get those gutturals, right?
Babylonians.
Okay, first and foremost, Babylonians.
Or was it the wise men of Babylon?
Good, the wise men of Babylon. So these would be, what essentially is happening, he's saying, hey, those of good stock who seem good, we want to essentially siphon their power and energy into our culture, into our system. So appoint really, really good young men of good stature who are trained in the wisdom of Jerusalem, bring them and teach them our literature. We're going to bring them up in our university system, in a sense, right? The king assigned them a daily portion of the royal rations of food and wine. They were to be educated for 3 years, so that at the end of that time they could be stationed in the king's court. So again, the idea is we have all of these exiles, those of good stock who seem good, select a bunch. We're going to essentially give them a master's education here in Babylon. They're going to learn the literature and language of our wise men. Go ahead.
This is a reach here, but are these the same wise men that we learn in the New Testament?
They're related conceptually. They're not exactly the same, but there's a correlation for sure.
Because that's where they get their education.
That's right. That's right.
One more question. So this group that they're selecting and putting aside, since Ashpenaz was a master of the eunuchs, would all of these have then also
become eunuchs
to keep them from breeding and keep them focused on
maybe. I don't know. It doesn't say that. And I have not read that, but it's possible that that is the case. I just wouldn't be able to tell you for sure because it's not within my knowledge, but
and your translation says royal rations, but in the ESV here it says like food that the king ate, and
exactly.
wine that the king drank. So
That's
really
right. Exactly.
It's really pulling them in.
The point is, let's what is the word? Let's assimilate. That's the word I'm looking for. Let's assimilate, or indoctrinate might be another word, right? Let's indoctrinate them into our court. We're essentially stealing away the unique cultural and religious heritage of the Judeans by taking their best and brightest and converting them over to the Babylonian way. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
This in the land of the Chaldeans, is this the same land from which Abram was brought out of?
Yes.
So is this the same knowledge and stuff that maybe was at that original Tower of Babel?
We're going to get into that. Yeah, that's great. Great question. So among these selected few who were, again, brought into the king's court so that they can, let's use that strong word, so that they could be indoctrinated into the Babylonian way. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the tribe of Judah. The palace master gave them other names. That's really important. What does it mean for me to give you a new name? New identity. I impose this identity upon you. You are not known by your Hebrew name. You're in Babylon now. And I'm going to call you the name of my God will be part of your new name. It's not your God. the name of my God will be your name. When every time someone calls upon you, you're going to have to recognize, right, that you have been forcibly removed from your heritage and this is your new identity and you can't do anything about it.
Didn't Jesus say he's going to give us a new name?
Yeah, so that he says, my own new name I give to you. Yes, so the giving of new names is the idea of someone in authority granting new identity. Yep, good. In this case, it's an evil thing.
Right.
Oh, I like my name.
Yeah, it's a good name. Well, I'm not going to get into that today. Yeah, sorry. The main point here, Daniel, he calls Belteshazzar. Hananiah, he called Shadrach. Mishael, he called Meshach. And Azariah, he called Abednego. That, I think people mispronounce it, but whatever. I'll just say it, Abednego. Okay, so Daniel is given this new identity. He's been stolen away into a foreign land, a land of great darkness, of worship of pagan gods, worship of the king. And he resolves he will not defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine. So he asked the palace master to allow him to not defile himself. So it's like, okay, fine. I can't do anything about the fact that everyone is now going to be calling me by a pagan god's name. I can't do anything about the fact that I have now been selected to be put into this education system that is going to be teaching me all of this pagan stuff. I will control what I'm taking in. I will not defile myself with that which is considered unclean by Levitical law, right? It shows that he sets up this foothold in his spiritual life that says, no, I am holding true with integrity to the God of my ancestors, the God of my fathers, to the Most High, the one whom I know is the Most High. Okay, so this is really important as the attitude for which Daniel is going to be taking this, that Jeremiah 29 attitude. I will operate for the good of Babylon. I will be a court official. I will be a servant of the king, but I will not defile myself. I will not become like one of them, right? Even though I will serve them, I will not become like one of them. Daniel is the model, guys. Okay? Daniel's the model.
So he maintained this resolve pretty young.
Yes. Again, the stalwart character of Daniel that is being shown here is, again, he's going through this assimilation, this indoctrination process. Take these young men of good stature and train them up to become Babylonian officials. And he's like, fine, but I'm not going to defile myself. I can't do anything about anything else, but I'm not going to do that, right?
Do we know how young men they are in this? Like 12, 13?
I can't say off the top of my head, but yeah, the idea here is, again, if you're being trained by a rabbi, you start pretty young. You start as like a young teenager. So a lot of the disciples were probably younger than 20.
So are we assuming these are the only 4 guys that actually stood true to their...
I don't think it has to be. They're the 4 most notable ones and the 4 ones that have these like essential persecution stories where they're delivered. Go ahead.
Paul said that what he's doing is like the exact opposite of what he should be doing. Like to not worry about defiling yourself with food, but then to instruct yourself in the way of the Lord.
Not necessarily. Like, that's a new covenant reality, right? So that's not, at this point, that would definitely not be what Paul would say, if that makes sense. The point of Paul is that you don't force the Gentiles to act according to Levitical law. You see what I'm saying? And for the sake of reaching the Gentiles, you don't have to follow the Levitical law in that sense. But Daniel is definitely operating how he should. So, make sense? Okay. The palace master said to Daniel, I am afraid of the Lord the king, my lord the king. He has appointed your food and drink. If he should see you in poorer condition than the other young men of your age, you would endanger my head with the king. But Daniel asked the guard whom the palace master had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. Essentially, don't make us eat the pork, okay? Don't make us eat the pork, guys. Then you can compare our appearance with the appearance of the young men who eat the royal rations and deal with your servants according to what you observe. So he agreed to this proposal and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, it was observed that they appeared better and fatter than all the young men who had been eating the royal rations. So the guard continued to withdraw their royal rations from the wine, and they were to drink, and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. To these 4 young men, God gave them knowledge and skill in every aspect of literature and wisdom. Daniel also had the insight into all visions and dreams. So they are rewarded for their faithfulness. With those who are trusted with little will be given much. This concept that because they have remained loyal and steadfast, God will exalt them now in the court of Nebuchadnezzar. And if you guys remember the Daniel plan from, I don't know, a couple decades back, what's ironic is like the Bible is saying that it's a lesser meal that they're having, okay? It's not the best meal that they could be having. They're willingly restricting themselves and trusting that God will provide them supernatural provision to keep their bodies healthy, even though they're not eating meat. So just wanted to point that out, because some people, I feel, misapply this and say, yeah, I'm going to have the Daniel plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was going to put that up. When I'm going on a Daniel diet, I was like, oh, that's crazy, because they kind of gained me.
Yeah. Well, the point is, it's a supernatural provision of God that is keeping their skin vibrant and their cheeks full, and, you know, like they're not looking sickly at the end of this. Okay, go ahead.
I think it's so beautiful how they didn't compromise.
Exactly. That's right.
They compromised, and they stood in their identity in God and who they know.
Yep. Stalwart resistance. The title of today's meeting is Daniel's Resistance, right? And it's this idea of you're in Babylon, you can seek the good of the Babylon while not being indoctrinated into Babylonian ways, right? And so that's the idea, is the sort of non-violent resistance that Daniel is showing and modeling that becomes a very, very key model for the rest of the biblical witness. Bob?
This is a beautiful example of God's part and our part.
Yep.
Because it starts with that God gave them favor.
Mm-hmm.
If they hadn't gotten favor, this wouldn't have gone anywhere.
Favor means grace. Yeah.
He basically, but I mean, he gave it with the palace, or whatever the guy was.
Yep.
Official, he gave them favor. So he was already receptive to what they were going to ask.
That's right.
And then they asked him. So it's like it's back and forth.
Yeah.
And then it does. Then God gave them, these abilities. So they're already going to be students, but then God gave them abilities from them.
Right. And the idea is you hold fast to the integrity of worship of only your God, only the Creator. And it's like Daniel and his friends are going to be risen above the rest. They are going to be set apart, right? Holy. They're remaining holy. That's the point. I will not defile myself. And the rest of the Babylonians are going to be in crises. And it's only Daniel and his friends who are going to be able to help those crises because they have remained stalwart in their resistance. They have maintained a level of integrity. That means we're not like everyone else. We're set apart. We're the special ones in a good way, you know? We will not defile ourselves. Make sense? Okay, and then let's just finish this chapter. At the end of the time that the king had set for them to be brought in, the palace master brought them into the presence of Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them. So this is their graduating class, right? Among them all, no one was found to compare with Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they were stationed in the king's court. In every matter a matter of wisdom and understanding concerning which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel continued there until the first year of King Cyrus. King Cyrus will be the later king who takes over Babylon and says, release the Jews, right? Make sense, guys? So that's a really good starter passage for establishing sort of the background of Daniel, who he is in the king's court. There's a little bit of David and Saul-ness going on here, right? The idea is like the chosen one who was able to help the king in his times of trouble, because now Nebuchadnezzar is going to be plagued by this nightmare, essentially. And no one can do anything about it except who? Daniel. Okay, so let's read in. Daniel chapter 2. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed such dreams that his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. So the king commanded that the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. But when they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I've had such a dream that my spirit is troubled and I desire to understand it. Or troubled by the desire to understand, excuse me. The Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic. Now, pause. I don't know if you guys know this. We've just switched biblical languages. Very interesting. We've just switched biblical language. So Daniel chapter 1 is in Hebrew. And now we've switched to Aramaic, which is going to be the language that Jesus speaks. It's a more universal language. It's similar to Hebrew. It's a related language to Hebrew, but it's not exactly Hebrew. So the three biblical languages are Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek. And it's only a few chapters in Daniel that we're in Aramaic now. So really interesting. The Chaldeans said to the king, "O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will reveal the interpretation." The king answered the Chaldeans, "This is a public decree. If you do not tell me both the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. But if you do tell me the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation." So Nebuchadnezzar, he's paranoid, he's anxious, he's troubled by this dream, and he's so troubled, and he wants to know that he is getting the right answer. So he means the one who is bestowed upon the supernatural knowledge of both what my dream was in the first place and the interpretation. That's the one who gains my favor in my court. The king answered, "I know with certainty that you are trying." Okay, they answered a second time. "Tell us the dream. We don't know your dream. How would we know your dream? How would we know what goes on in your own head? Tell us the dream and we'll give you the interpretation." Like, that's fair, right? The king answered, "I know with certainty that you are trying to gain time because you see the decree from me is firm. If you do not tell me the dream, there is but one verdict for you. You have agreed to speak lying and misleading words to me until things take a turn. Now, therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation." So it's this test. The dream is so confusing to him and so terrifying to him that he says, "I don't want you to just give me stock answers, right? I don't want to just say, "Oh, what do you think about this?" It needs to be a true prophetic message, because this is too great of a thing for me to just pass it off, right, to you guys. You have to be able to tell me the dream, and then I will know that you actually can give me the interpretation. Okay? Does that make sense? You laughing? What?
Yeah, so just like the way he's saying, he's like, "Oh yeah, I have a dream. I don't want you to tell me what it's about. But you also have to tell me what I dreamed."
Yeah. It's his test to say,
It's like saying, "What's in my pocket?"
It's the test to say, I can't trust a magician. I can't trust a Chaldean unless they actually prove to me their supernatural knowledge. The Chaldeans answered the king, and this is the important statement: "There is no one on earth who can reveal what the king demands. This is impossible. What are you talking about, Nebuchadnezzar? You're going mad. You're going crazy. You're like Saul, right? In fact, no king, however great or powerful, has ever asked anything of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king is asking is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with mortals." Because of this, the king flew into a violent rage and commanded that all of the wise men of Babylon be destroyed. The decree was issued, and the wise men were about to be executed, and they looked for Daniel and his companions to execute them. Then Daniel responded with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the king chief's executioner, who had gone to execute the wise men of Babylon. He asked Arioch, the royal official, "Why is the decree of the king so urgent?" Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. So Daniel went in and requested that the king give him time, and he would tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went home and informed his companions, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, of the matter, and told them to seek mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven. Daniel said, "Blessed be the name of God from age to age, for wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons, deposes kings, and sets up kings. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to those who have understanding. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what is in the darkness, and light dwells with him. To you, O God of my ancestors, I give thanks and praise, for you have given me wisdom and power, and have now revealed to me what we asked of you, for you have revealed to us what the king ordered." So this is what's really important. The Chaldeans, the enchanters, the magicians said, you're tripping, Nebuchadnezzar. There's no way we are going to be able to understand this. Only a supernatural revelation will bring this. And Daniel says, yeah, why don't I ask for it? Why don't I ask for it instead of trying to make things up and taking for myself? Why don't I ask the true God of heaven, the Most High, for mercy? And he will grant me a way out, right? I've not defiled myself. I've held steadfast in integrity to God, and now he will deliver good on his promises to give me a hope in a future, per Jeremiah 29. Make sense?
I think that's for now, though. That's what we do.
Yes.
We're supposed to, a lot of people don't know, we're supposed to communicate to the Lord.
That's right.
So if we don't understand something.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
I got a little bit too, like, it's pretty cool, like, everybody saying, like, you know what I'm saying, like, don't be, like, in the world, but, you know what I mean, but, like, I mean, don't be of the world, but be in the world. That's, like, even that, too, but then it's, like, because, you know, there's a lot of people, like, hey, well, like, in that situation with Daniel, could have easily be like, you know what, I'm not doing it, man, God, I trust in you, he kills me, I'm this and that, you know, a lot of us could kind of be like, well, you know what, I'm not be of the world, like, I'm not going to talk to this person, or I'm not going to do this type of thing, I'm not going to do this. But then I found the verse in Matthew 10, it says, behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves.
Yeah.
Therefore, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And when I think, like, he used the wisdom to be like, okay, Lord, he said, I ain't going to find myself. I didn't do all this. So I'm going to ask you, okay, Lord, can I save me from this? But also, too, I'm going to do
Give me the power to act.
Yeah, to act. I'm going to do this. I'm going to trust you.
Yeah.
This could be hard to believe. It's like, well, this dude's a sinner, or this person, I'm not going to do this. And sometimes God can use us.
You are, again, saying exactly that Daniel has the heart of Jeremiah 29:11. You know what I mean? I'm not just going to be like, screw you, Nebuchadnezzar. Screw you, wise men of Babylon. No, I'm going to seek the good. Let there be no violent bloodshed, because God will have mercy on us all, right? If we ask for it.
How many times do we close up in self-preservation over such a small thing?
Right.
And we don't trust in God in the unknown and in that impassable barrier. He's facing sure death in, like, not just death, but a brutal, violent death of a king that's upset. And just like the other soothsayers and everybody else on the staff, literally pulled limb to limb like they did that. And it's excruciating. They were like filleting people alive, like horrible deaths. That's what he's looking at. He's like, either I trust in my God or I'm going to be pulled to death. But how many of us would just be like,
shrink up,
sink down and be like, I'm going to die, you know, like be fearful.
Exactly.
Instead, the example is to, like, trust in God in the impossible moment, and to do an impossible thing, like even the other guys said it. This is impossible. Task you cannot do as a human. It has to be intervened by your.
It has to be a true divine revelation. Yep. Good words all around. Yeah, really good stuff, guys. The point is, Daniel is not shrinking, but he's rising. Right? He's rising to the occasion. Go ahead.
New Testament lingo, this is a word of knowledge.
Yes, a word of knowledge. Yeah.
Something you can't know unless God.
That's right. That's right. Do you guys want to know what the dream was?
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. Then Arioch quickly brought Daniel before the king and said to him, I have found among the exiles of Judah a man who can tell the king the interpretation. The king said to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, are you able to tell me the dream that I have seen and its interpretation? So again, think about just the nuances of this. Daniel has been trained up in attempted indoctrination into this, and yet he's still in service to the king, right? He's still operating for the good of Babylon. And the king is like, oh, hello, the name of my God in your name that I forced upon you, you know? And Daniel's like, you don't understand. Like, the only one who's going to give you this dream is not even me, it's God. God is going to reveal the dream through me, okay? Yeah, not your God, the God of heaven, right? So, are you able to tell me the dream that I've seen and its interpretation? Daniel answered the king. No wise men, enchanters, magicians, or diviners can show to you, the king, the mystery that the king is asking. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. And he has disclosed to King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen at the end. So he's already telling you what the dream is going to be about. The dream is going to be about what? The end. Your dream and the visions of your head as you lay in bed were these. To you, O king, as you lay in bed, came thoughts of what would be hereafter. So he's saying, you were sort of mulling over, I have this kingdom, but what's coming? Where does this kingdom go to? And the revealer of mysteries, God, disclose to you what is going to be. But as for me, the mystery has not been revealed to me because of any wisdom that I have more than any other living being. It's not in me that the revelation comes from, but in the order that the interpretation might be known to the king, and that you may understand the thoughts of your mind. He's giving all glory to God. And here's the dream. You were looking, O king, and there appeared to be a great statue. The statue was huge, its brilliance extraordinary. It was standing before you, and its appearance was frightening. The head of that statue was fine gold, its chest and arms of silver, its midsection and its thighs of bronze, and its legs of iron. Its feet were partly of iron and partly of clay. As you looked upon this great statue, a stone was cut. A stone was cut. Cut from where? He'll answer, but yes, a mountain. A stone was cut, but not of human hands. Wait, a stone was cut, so it just organically, simultaneously comes out forth, right? Not of human hands, and it smashed the statue right at the feet of iron and clay and broke them into pieces. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were all broken into pieces and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind blew them away, so that not a trace of them could be found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain, and that mountain became the earth, filled the whole earth, right? Interesting. Before we get into the interpretation, and I know you guys know this story, most of you, thoughts on the dream?
Oh, I could too.
Without getting into the interpretation?
Well, I just want to hear your thoughts.
How did the you said it's like I didn't really think about this. What was built first from his feet?
Well, he describes it from head to toe.
So from head to toe, what was his head? Like it's a bronze.
Gold, silver, bronze, iron, and then iron plus clay.
I don't know. I'm just saying,
It's like the most precious things at the top and then the lower down. Yeah, it's lower.
Yeah. So there's a dissension. Yep. Good.
Wasn't clay like a unclean material? And
I don't know.
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah.
Fragile compared to metal.
Yeah. The point is, you're going from the most precious metal down to the sort of like a mixture, right? Sort of a.
Referring to the clay is the sacred water, purification water was in stone because it couldn't absorb impurities.
Yeah.
And clay was used for like drinking vessels and stuff, but not for purity.
Yeah, I was gonna say we find pottery all over Israel, so I mean I don't. Yeah. So, but yeah, so the bottom is sort of like this odd mixture, this weakened mixture. Okay, you guys ready? That was the dream. Now I will tell the king of its interpretation. You, O king, the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the might, and the glory, into whose hand he has given human beings wherever they live, the wild animals of the field, the birds of the air, and whom he has established as ruler over them all. Pause. He's saying, hey, you kind of are like Adam, you know? You are given dominion over all things. You are this exalted figure, and it's not by your own might. God set you up to be that way, right? God is sovereign, and he allowed you this opportunity to be a good king. Of course, Nebuchadnezzar is not a good king, but whatever power you have came from above. Like Pilate, yeah. You have no power over me except that which is given to you from heaven. Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold on that statue. The golden head represents you. After you shall arise another kingdom, inferior to yours, and yet a third kingdom shall arise, and that will be of bronze, which shall rule over the whole earth. And there shall be a fourth kingdom, as strong as iron, just as iron crushes and smashes everything. It shall crush and shatter all these. So you are the head of gold. Then there's something like you coming after you, but of lesser stature. Then still another one of lesser stature, but still one statue, right? and consecutively, until as you saw the feet of pottery, the feet and toes of partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It shall be a divided kingdom. But some of the strength of iron shall be mixed in it, as you saw the iron mixed with the clay. As the toes of the feet were part iron and part clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with the clay, so they will mix together with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that shall never be destroyed. Nor shall this kingdom be left to another people. It shall crush all these kingdoms and bring them to an end, and it shall stand forever. Just as you saw that a stone was cut from the mountain, not by hands, and that it crushed the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold, the great God has informed the king what shall be hereafter. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, worshipped Daniel, and commanded that a grain offering and incense be offered to him. The king said to Daniel, "Truly, your God is God of gods and Lord of kings, and revealer of mysteries, for you have been able to reveal this mystery." Then the king promoted Daniel, gave him many great gifts, and made him to be ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and the chief prefect over all the wise men of Babylon. Daniel made a request of the king, and he appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel remained in the king's court. Okay. Now, I found a cartoon animation of this. Are you guys interested in watching it? Okay.
I want to say one more thing about what you had asked about the purity. It points out here too that the iron doesn't mix with clay, and that's like an impurity. It can't come together, so that makes it even more fragile in that moment. So your question is related to that part.
Sorry, let me find this. Hang on, guys. Ah, there it is. Thoughts.
What he was showing a little bit was like, I don't know, the kingdoms, what's going to be, it's going, I know it's in the Bible, but it's like Jerusalem, or like, what's how.
Yeah. What were the kingdoms? That interpreted a little bit, right? It hasn't said yet. Or it hasn't said what the kingdoms will be. So, good. Other thoughts?
I wonder if he was ready to die as he was telling the king, thinking, "Oh, he's going to kill me for sure."
Yeah, maybe. Giving him the message your kingdom's going to fall. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's not what we want to talk about.
Yeah. Okay. Nothing?
Wasn't Persia one of those kingdoms?
It would be, yes. It would be the silver one, technically. Yeah. Let me get into the slides because no one is saying very much.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, this is more into the interpretation again, but the stone that destroys the empires, the cornerstone, perhaps.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Huh?
I looked it up.
Oh.
I looked it up.
You looked what up?
Babylon is gold. Mediocre.
Well, hang on. I'll just say, this is a matter of debate to this day. Okay? This is a matter of debate to this day about which kingdoms represent which. So you're not going to find a definitive answer. I'll just say that.
Rome would be the feet, though, right?
To some interpreters, yeah. Yeah, to some interpreters.
But realistically, like the end is the most important. The rock that comes and then grows bigger than the world itself, like the 1,000-year reign of Christ of the world.
Yeah, so this gets into different opinions on eschatology, the theology of the end. We're not going to get into that today, so I'm not going to give you a scheme for interpretation today. Later on, we'll talk through it when we get to Revelation, really, probably.
I mean, the short answer is Christ is the rock that
Yes, there you go.
destroys those worldly kingdoms.
So let's just establish this. Again, I want you to understand the major theme here. Again, hearkening to what is Babylon versus what is the kingdom of God. So number one, what is the statue of metal, right? It's taking these natural elements and forming this image, right, to bow down to worship. It represents this, again, Tower of Babel, human technology, technological development, that we worship the works of our own hands, right? And then it says this natural stone, right? This stone that is cut without human hands comes down and destroys that very statue, and itself grows into a mountain, if you guys remember. So, are you following that? Yep.
Isn't that kind of like the parable of the kingdom of heaven and how it's like a mustard seed?
Yes.
Small seeds and it grows into a big.
Yes, that's right.
Well,
See you, bro.
the difference between a ziggurat and the mountain of God.
Exactly. Very true.
The mountain of man versus the mountain of God.
So let's get into the slides. Does that sound good? Okay. So I just want to reframe for you, go back a little bit, and just let's talk about Daniel's name. Daniel's name is God is my judge. God is my judge. Daniel's name is noteworthy when considering that it is forcibly changed by the court officials of King Nebuchadnezzar. While his Jewish heritage will be censored and stamped out by his oppressors, Daniel will be non-violently resistant by holding fast to God's scriptural commands from the Torah to remain pure in a kingdom of darkness. In this way, Daniel's name reinforces his position that the Almighty is the one he should fear, not Nebuchadnezzar, right? And Daniel was taught what? The literature and language of the Chaldeans, okay? I went back and we're going to go all the way up into the dream, okay? The Chaldeans. Famous during the time of the exile were those considered the wisest of Mesopotamia, the Chaldean astrologers. These were key figures in the religious and cultural development of the empire of Babylon, and they were of great importance within the court of King Nebuchadnezzar himself. Chaldeans were star charters, fortune tellers, considered to be able to interpret dreams and give prophetic words. So that's the context, is no one of these Chaldeans can interpret the king's dream, but Daniel can. And yes, you asked about Abraham. Let's go all the way back to Genesis chapter 15. God says to Abraham, I am Yahweh who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans, right? Ur being you could say, a suburb kingdom of Babylon proper. I brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land to inherit it. So Abraham's family at one point was living amongst this exaltation of humanity, these pagans, and this great pagan tradition of literature and science and astrology and things like that. Very highly educated people. Abraham's family is called out. And remember how in Genesis chapter 11, let us build a tower with its top in the heavens and make a name for ourselves. This is all recap. The builders of Babel strove to make their own name great. God will bless Abraham and make his name great instead as the chosen one. I make your name great. You don't make a great name for yourself, right? Israel's ancestor Abraham long ago had been called out of Babylonia, where ziggurat towers and Chaldean astrologers were the dominant influences on human society, culture, and development, right? Abraham was called out into the wilderness and given a message by God that went something like this. I called you out of the land of those stargazers who think that they can make a name for themselves by building a tower to the heavens in their own power. Instead, by my power, I will make your name great. I will make your offspring like the stars. It is only by my power that in you the whole world will be blessed. And that's the whole Isaac miracle child nature of that, right? So with the context of understanding who are the Chaldeans, what are the ziggurats, again, it's this idea of the radical transformation, a stone cut without human hands type of deal that Abraham is called out into this miraculous setting in which only God's movement will bring about a salvation. Yet, Abraham's offspring is now back in the land he was called from in the first place. Do you guys see the irony of the story of the Bible? If you don't understand the meta story of the Bible, it's got an irony to it. It starts with Abraham being called out of the Chaldeans and the ziggurats and the stargazers and, the people who think that they can divine for themselves knowledge. And then you have Daniel, Abraham's descendant, back in that very area. It's this irony. So it's another one of these examples where God is saying, I'm bringing you into a place where it's going to seem impossible. I'm bringing you into a place where it's going to seem like there's no way. There's no way by our own power that we're going to escape from the jaws of Babylon, from the jaws of the kingdom of darkness, right? And so it is in this realm of the dead, this realm of Babylon, the realm of the kingdom of darkness, that Abraham's offspring, Daniel, encounters King Nebi, right? King Nebuchadnezzar. So he's this great king who has this dream, right? And we've gone over this now, the idea of the dream. And one of these main, again, messages that you have to get from the story of Abraham, from the story of Daniel, from what Daniel says to Nebuchadnezzar is, he says, "O king, humans cannot by their own power and understanding reveal this mystery, but the living God, the God of heaven, who reveals mysteries, he is granting a word of knowledge. He is granting a revelation. It's not something that we're bringing up within ourselves. No enchanter, no magician, no Chaldean would be able to achieve this." And so he interprets the dream, or he gives the dream. He tells him supernaturally what the dream is about this great statue. But I've omitted the bottom ones. Yeah. So anyway, clearly the kingdom of gold is Babylon. He says, you are the kingdom of gold, right? Your kingdom is the head. Now, I want you to recognize that this is an amalgamation of kingdoms, right? This is like one thing. And this is sort of what we mean by Babylon is one thing. The head of this statue is Babylon. That which comes after it follows the head, follows from the head, meaning when you get to the Medes and Persians and their empire, did Babylon truly go away? Well, no, Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar's kingdom went away, but Babylon still continues in the kingdom of silver. Right? The idea is that Babylon isn't truly gone even when the exile is over. Kingdom of bronze is, I think, most certainly the Greek Empire. So this, by the way, the torso area, when we get into the 400 years meeting, and we're talking about Alexander the Great and things like that, we're going to be in that stage. And then the kingdom of iron and the kingdom of iron plus clay as the feet. I've omitted for you because this is a disagreed upon thing, and I don't want to show my cards just yet. So popular interpretations are that iron is Rome, and we don't know what the iron and clay are. Some people will say the iron and clay represent a kingdom still yet to come. Some people would say it's the Roman Empire. That it's like a version of the Roman Empire, essentially, because it's the iron, then the iron mixed with the clay. It's not an entirely different. So if you accept that iron, that which comes after Greek, is Roman, then this is a version of the Roman Empire mixed with the clay. I'm not showing my cards, though.
Okay. We also have the age of the Gentile and the leadership of that period, the time. So
yes.
And if Christ is coming to destroy that and be the next step.
I will say the main disagreement is the stone that comes cut from the mountain, which destroys the statue. Is that talking about a later date, or is it talking about the establishment of the kingdom in the time and era of the Gospels, right? In the book of Acts, and which grow like in that sense, the stone is cut, destroys the statue. The stone grows to a mountain that fills the whole earth. Are we in that growing page? Is the stone being cut first or second coming?
It's not clear enough to be able to.
Seems that way. There might be some clues that we can, but I'm not going to talk about that yet. Okay, let's go.
The iron and clay is the wheat and tares, and then the stone is kind of like how he says, whoever the stone falls upon, it'll be scattered or whatever, like that.
Yes, there's a play on the imagery in that statement. I'm just not going to get into what kingdom is being represented yet. Okay, we may talk about it. The main point you have to understand is what is happening here. It means the wheels of time are turning. The wheels of time are turning. Think about Ezekiel's vision. And a countdown has started. That's the main thing you need to understand. The main message of Daniel to Nebuchadnezzar. God revealed to you a countdown has started. He pressed play on that countdown because you can see a series of kingdoms to come. And what is going to happen is those kingdoms, ultimately, all of them will be smashed to bits and pieces and blown away in the wind. And the organic, natural, genuine, supernatural kingdom of God will rise up from that smashing. Okay? It will grow and fill the entire earth. It will overtake everything.
I like that it usually crushed.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Shatter them to pieces like pottery is a lot of this Psalm 2 language of the Lord said to me, you are my son, today I have begotten you. Ask of me, I will give the nations your inheritance. You will rule them with a rod of iron and smash them into pieces like pottery, right? Crush the head. Yeah, there you go. Okay, you brought it to the Genesis 3. That's good. Yep. Good. Yep.
I also think it's interesting that you just really see that essence God is working continuously in the same way that he said he was going to work. Now, even now, into like the spiritual realm. He said, I'm going to deal with these guys, I'm going to do this stuff, I'm going to do it this way. Right? Now I'm going to make my own people, establish my thing. Now, then you guys are supposed to be the priests now to bless the nation.
Right.
And instead, by this point, they weren't doing that. They've gone the opposite way. So the exile is kind of like punishment / God forcing them to say, no, you need to go.
This is the point.
Yeah. Go to Babylon, seek the welfare, and it's all the witness of who God is and what he wants for all people.
Right. Yeah, so you could say, that's a good word in that you can say part of the problem of Israel, the original kingdom of Israel, is that when they set up their kingdom, they think that we want a king like all the other nations, right? So they should have seen themselves as exiles in Babylon to begin with. That's part of the point. They made themselves too at home in the flesh, too at home in the things of this world. And that's what led to their idolatry. So that's a good word. All right, see you, Jasper. So the main point, a countdown has started, right? The countdown has started. And the rock is cut out of a mountain, but not with human hands. I read a church father once who said this is a type of the virgin birth. I'm not going to get into that today, right? But again,
it into my mind.
It did it enter your mind? Yeah. The idea is this king to come, or this kingdom to come, is a virgin birth type of thing. It's a supernatural reality, right? That only God can provide. Good. And the rock turns into a mountain. Think about the fullness of the body of Christ, or what Paul calls the fullness of the stature of Christ. We're all in agreement and we all understand the rock is Jesus, right?
Yeah.
The rock which smashes the statue is Jesus, the man Jesus, and his body, the body of believers, right? The body of believers is the rock turning into a great mountain. Peter says you are living stones set up in a temple. Yep, good. Growing into as this is language of Paul, growing into the full stature of Christ, or in another way, Paul says Christ fills all things, or he continues to grow into the fullness of all things, right? The New Jerusalem, the Zion. Yep, good. There was one of the videos. Yeah, it's all talking about the same thing, right? And again, relate it back to this cosmic mountain pattern that we see in the Old Testament. In the days to come, the mountain of Yahweh's house will be established as the highest of the mountains, and all nations stream to it, right? So this dream is playing, it's in conversation with earlier passages like Isaiah, for example. Good. The key point of King Nebuchadnezzar's dream, as interpreted by Daniel, is that Babylon is soon going to be replaced, meaning the physical Babylon is going to soon be replaced by another kingdom. And then after that, another kingdom, and another, until finally, a rock made not with human hands, or cut without human hands, will come and smash the cycle of world empires. Isn't it interesting, by the way? He says the rock is cut from the peak of the mountain, right? Without human hands. It's this idea of God, like imagine the mountain that it's cut from is the kingdom of heaven in heaven, right? The rock is cut, comes down, smashes, and then establishes the kingdom of heaven on earth, right? It goes cut from this mountain, falls to the earth, smashes, and then builds the mountain on the earth until the mountain becomes the whole earth. It's unity of heaven and earth. Become a mountain that fills the whole earth as the true everlasting kingdom. Okay, we're going to go a little late today. Is that okay? The technical difficulties, we should have had enough time, but sorry guys. Is that okay? Cool. We'll probably actually finish at chapter 3. Maybe I'll briefly go over the other chapters. Okay, so what is King Nebuchadnezzar's response to this message that Daniel gave him? Hey, your kingdom's going to fall, but there's going to be a kingdom to come that will be an everlasting kingdom.
Off with your head.
His response is, man, I got to hold on to this while it lasts. So I'm going to create I'm the head of gold. Okay, I'm going to create a golden statue and make everyone bow down before it. I'm going to enjoy my exalted status while it lasts, right? So King Nebuchadnezzar made a golden statue whose height was 60 cubits and whose width was 60 cubits, and he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then King Nebuchadnezzar sent for the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to assemble and come to the dedication of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers, the justices, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces, that's a mouthful, assembled for the dedication of the statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. When they were standing before the statue that Nebuchadnezzar had set up, the herald proclaimed aloud, "You are commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that when you hear the sound of the horn, the pipe, the lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, you are to fall down and worship the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship shall immediately be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire." Therefore, as soon as all the peoples heard the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, all the peoples, nations, and languages fell down and worshipped the golden statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. This has like an abomination of desolation feeling going on right now, whereas the idea is all the nations, all the world is perverted in its worship of this golden image, right? Yeah, he did build it, but he only builds it of gold, right? Yeah, so it's better. The idea is he builds an image representing himself as a god, for sure, because he says, "You are the head of gold," and then he builds an image statue of gold.
That statue. What the trick to me is the fact
right.
Daniel said, "This is not from me, this is from God. God gave you your power." And he's like, "Hurry, I'm a god."
He is like fighting, kicking, and screaming against that dream and interpretation almost, even though he knows that it's true. You know, he knows that his time is short, but he wants to go down in flames. Accordingly, at this time, certain Chaldeans came forward and denounced the Jews, the Judeans. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "O king, live forever. You, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble shall fall down and worship before the golden statue. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be thrown into a furnace of blazing fire. There are certain Jews that you have appointed over the affairs of the province of Babylon." Man, those Chaldeans are getting jealous, right? "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men pay no heed to you, O king. They do not serve your gods. They do not worship the golden statue that you have set up." Then King Nebuchadnezzar, in a furious rage, commanded that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought in, so that they brought in those men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods and you do not worship the golden statue that I have set up? Now, if you are ready, when you hear the sound of the horn, pipe, lyre, trigon, harp, drum, and entire musical ensemble, you shall fall down and worship the statue that I have made. But if you do not worship, you shall be immediately thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. And who is the God who will deliver you out of my hands?" Again, he sees himself as the Almighty. What does God say in the Old Testament? In a variety of passages, he says, "No one can deliver out of my hand." That's what God says, Yahweh. And so Nebuchadnezzar is mirroring that statement. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered the king, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to present a defense to you in this matter. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the furnace of blazing fire out of your hand, let him deliver us. But if not, let it be known to you, king, that we will not serve your gods and we will not worship the golden statue you have set up anyway." Right? They're saying whether we're delivered or not, yeah, we're not doing that. Then Nebuchadnezzar was so filled with rage against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Remember, these are Daniel's friends, right? What are their names? Hananiah, Azariah, Mishael. Hey, there you go. He was so enraged that his face became distorted, right? There's almost like a foreshadowing of when he becomes beast-like, right? Later on in the book. He ordered the furnace be heated up 7 times more than was customary and ordered some of the strongest guards in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the furnace of blazing fire. So the men were bound, still wearing their tunics, their trousers, their hats, their other garments, and they were thrown into the furnace of blazing fire. You're supposed to see that with that note. You're supposed to see that there's no ritual or ceremony to this. He says, "Get them in that fire now." with their clothes still on, what they're wearing right now. Just get them in there. Go. Do away with them.
I would actually prefer that it be heated up 7
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Get it over with, yeah. Because the king's command was so urgent and the furnace was so overheated, the raging flames killed the men who lifted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the fire is like spewing out of the furnace. It's so hot, right? That you can't even get close to it to throw the prisoners in without you catching on fire and dying, right?
His best guy.
Yeah, his best guys, his strongest guys, yep. But the three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound into the furnace, so that they fall on their bellies, you could think, like with their hands behind their back or something. Then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he jumped out of his seat, right? He said to his counselors, "Wait, you guys threw three men in there, right?" They answered the king, "That's true. Yeah, we did." He replied, "Why then do I see four people walking around in there? I see four men unbound walking in the middle of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the fourth, he's glowing like an Elohim. He's glowing like a god." Nebuchadnezzar then approached the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He's so entranced by this that he gets close, right? And he says to them, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come out here." So they walked out of the fire. And the satraps, the prefects, the governors, the king's counselors gathered together and saw the fire had not any power over the bodies of those men. The hair of their heads was not singed, their tunics were not scorched, and not even the smell of fire came from them. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. They disobeyed the king's command and yielded up their bodies, rather than serve and worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree, any people, nation, or language that utters blasphemy against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be torn limb from limb, and their houses laid in ruins, for there is no God who is able to deliver in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. We are going to have to stop the reading there. I'll give you some slides to give you just synopses of the other chapters that we were going to cover today that we're not going to be able to, but yeah.
Where was Daniel?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Let's just get into the slides. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so remember the Old Testament role of the prophet. What is the prophet to do? Back in the kingdom of Israel, what's the point of a prophet?
Shepherd the nation of Israel.
Sorry? Shepherd the nation of Israel. What does that functionally look like, though? What are they most often found doing?
Be the voice of God.
Yes.
Tell the king.
Rebuking the king.
How you're wrong.
Rebuking the king, right? Mostly what the prophet is doing, and he's saying, man, we as a people are messed up, and it all starts at the head. And so we are essentially looking at these roles that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are playing are similar in that way. They are subliminally speaking truth to power in that Nebuchadnezzar is on a mad power trip, and they say, no, this is not what we will do. They're again following the example of Daniel and what their example was earlier, in that they would not have the rations of the food. It's the same. It's a similar thing, right? And so we have this prophetic witness that is going on here, speaking truth to the power of Babylon and saying, we will not worship you as a god. We will not worship the idol statue that you have set up. Within the story of the prophets, they are really what we understand to be martyrs. Martyr is the Greek term for witness. And what it means is bearing witness to God's covenant to the people and command to humanity, bearing witness to that thing. We are going to speak truth to power, and most often is the case that because they have the human power, we will actually suffer. They're not going to like our message. And so you have here in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, a martyrdom story. Now they're delivered from their martyrdom. They're delivered from this state of being killed for having integrity, right? But this is where we see, again, seeds of New Testament examples of Peter, Paul, and the apostles and the disciples of Jesus suffering. And Jesus, of course, himself saying, If they hate you, they hated me first, right? Living with integrity in exile. While living in a hostile nation, the people of God should expect to be hated. In the book of Daniel, we continue to see those loyal to the Most High persecuted by those in power who demand a pledge of total allegiance. The prophets of the Old Testament are understood as covenant enforcers who speak truth to the powers and yet receive, in return, brutal punishments and death. Nebuchadnezzar's ego and self-exaltation requires that all bend the knee. Not one person can be allowed to resist, right? He sees himself as God in that way, right? Here, the mad king plays as a god on earth, as a self-deceived sovereign. Such is the case in all situations where we find the people of the Most High persecuted and put to death for their commitment to worship and serve only the Creator. In the scriptures, this is a picture of what it means to live in a world under the dominion of enemy spiritual forces. The rebel spirits demand our allegiances. They demand our worship. They reinforce their rule through totalitarian human governments and rampant sin natures, right? In the midst of gripping oppression, the people of God model ultimate trust in the one who has true power. This is what we talked about at the beginning. You're in a kingdom of darkness. You're supposed to seek the good of Babylon. By the way, Kyler, I sent everyone the Sunflowers in Babylon poem. Yeah, they all liked it. Kyler's the one who showed me that originally. So that was part of the video resources for this week. And so they're supposed to seek the good of Babylon, but oftentimes seeking the good of Babylon will mean in your own death. The powers and principalities, they don't like that you're bringing the kingdom of God, or you're helping to build for the kingdom of God on earth, right? And so they want to kill you for it. And so this is what we see in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But they are delivered. God is proving a point to Nebuchadnezzar. God himself is very interesting in this story. God himself has a unique relationship with Nebuchadnezzar. If you guys have noticed, he gives Nebuchadnezzar multiple opportunities, right, to repent. Ultimately, by the end of it, Nebuchadnezzar does seem to turn around. It's very interesting. Whereas Belshazzar, his son, does not. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get into that story today. But I want, first of all, for you to understand what is going on in this story that's typological. What is going on in the story that resembles a pattern or caps into a pattern or establishes a pattern for what we understand, you could say, salvation to be, for example. What's going on in this story? Because God is saving his people, right? So what does that resemble?
I don't know about for salvation, but just in seeing Nebuchadnezzar, it's glorifying himself, and then I guess he's like praising Daniel here, gives glory to God, and then he goes back to praising himself, and then he goes back to praising God. Like instead of because first he says, worship this statue of me, and then if you don't, then you're going to be destroyed. And he says, hey, if you worship anyone besides this God, then you're going to be destroyed.
How is this a picture of salvation? I know it's really blurry, but you can see the shadows of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
The model of Gehenna,
Okay.
like the lake of
So fire in the Bible, it can be an image of punishment. It also, where have we had this fiery furnace imagery already? We talked about it at length weeks ago. Fiery furnace imagery in Isaiah. In Isaiah, if you guys remember, that God says, I'm going to throw you or make you pass through a furnace. And those which are withstanding the furnace and coming out on the other side are the ones who are prepared for my kingdom, right? This purifying fire, destroying the alloy, good. You could say those who cast Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire are the impurities, right? Whereas Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will pass through the fire, come back out to the other side. And why is it that they're able to come back on the other side?
I was going to say something else besides what we just asked. But this situation reminds me a lot of Pharaoh and Moses. It correlates like so similar.
And the plagues upon Egypt, right? So in the plagues of Egypt is undergoing a judgment. There's a fire that is falling down, but there's a protection that is being provided for the people of God, right?
Giving like Pharaoh chances.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Chance, and
good.
Also gives Nebuchadnezzar chance after chance.
That's good.
God is the God of all gods.
Yeah. Okay.
So the answer to your question directly is the protection and grace of Jesus, just like Psalm 23, where though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, like God is protecting even though you're in imminent death.
I will fear no evil, for you are with me.
The Holy Spirit.
So the fires of the superheated furnace that are burning, it's like they're not really genuine fire in the way that we understand it. Because when God shows up, they become the fires of the burning bush, right? The fire that does not burn. And then again, it's important for you to understand that people do get burned in this situation.
Yeah. It is real fire.
It's a real fire.
I've been saved.
Right. Yes. But the point is, people do get burned by this fiery presence of God in the midst of this furnace, right? And so this is what I want to show. This is a significant typological picture of what hellfire means and looks like. While the people of God are purified in the fiery presence of God, those on the outside who provoked the fiery presence themselves, they're the ones who get burned. Okay? You should see in this an eschatological picture. A picture of the lake of fire versus the fiery presence of the Holy Spirit, of God in the midst of the fires with his people, and then those on the outside who threw them in the first place. They actually are the ones who go into the furnace. They're the ones who get burned. You guys see in that heaven and hell? You guys see that idea? Okay. Make sense?
Can I make a side note on this?
Mm-hmm.
So, in a fire, you throw something in there, and they present as a darkness, right? Those three guys are dark in the brightness of the glow, and it was on fire so much that it was probably white hot. You know when fire gets super hot?
Right.
It's like bright.
Right.
But then he sees an image in there that's brighter than...
Seemingly brighter, yeah. That's sort of what I mean. It's like the fire transforms into a fire that is the fiery presence of God. You know, it's not just this natural fire that is produced. It's like God's fiery presence emerges out of that fire and becomes the genuine fire. But it doesn't kill Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego at all. They're preserved. It's a burning bush type fire.
But that, if it was Christ or an element of God's glory in there with those guys, it is even brighter than the heat of the
that's
fire.
right. I definitely would say you could say that this is Jesus this is the angel of Yahweh or the messenger of Yahweh, pre-incarnate. If you guys don't remember stuff about the messenger of Yahweh, when we get into the Trinity, we will talk all about that, okay? But what is one of the main messages? What is the thing that saves us? Christ, who joins with us in our affliction. He joins with us in our punishment. He joins with us in our suffering. They're supposed to suffer this condemnation, and yet he appears with them. And that's what saves them, what delivers them out of the fire. Right? Isn't that cool? Fiery furnace is like a major, again, important typological image that you should see. You're doomed to that fire, right? You're doomed to that fire.
Your faith and trust.
Your faith.
In the
right?
appearance of possible death.
Yeah. And that God could deliver us. And if he wills it, he will. And he does. He shows up. And he burns the captors, but he preserves you through that punishment. Cool? By joining you. Now, one passage that we have to skip is the story of King Nebuchadnezzar turning into an animal. Not really, but if you guys remember. This is his final chance that God gives him. God gives Nebuchadnezzar 3 chances, and this is his final chance. And in this instance, it says Nebuchadnezzar is walking on the roof of his house, and he says, "Is this not great Babylon, which I have built by my own power and might?" And then it says God gives him this tormented mind, the mind of an animal, so that he goes to live amongst the beasts. And there's something very intrinsically important in understanding, again, the way that Nebuchadnezzar talks about himself and his kingdom is beast-like. This is the origin, really, of when you have this idea of the mark of the beast or the beast of Revelation, right? Nebuchadnezzar becomes an image of this, that the self-exaltation of the human, not that God exalts you, sets you on high and dominion over, but you self-exalt it, give yourself this exaltation. You actually devolve, right? You become like an animal. You're given over to a debased mind, right? So essentially, you're supposed to think of himself as he becomes a wild man who goes and lives out in the wilderness and is kind of going nuts, right? But then eventually God releases that imprisonment of his mind and he receives human intelligence again, right? So you can just think he goes on a schizophrenic rage. He starts tripping for like a long time. So we can't cover that today, but you can go read it. And then he turns around. It's remarkable. And you know what? Daniel has sections of it that are written in Nebuchadnezzar's first person. If you guys have read, he says, Nebuchadnezzar speaks from the first person. I, Nebuchadnezzar, exalt now the Most High God. We should worship him, our creator. And then the other story that we cannot get into or read is the Belshazzar's feast. So this is now Nebuchadnezzar's son who is holding this great banquet. The context, the subliminal sort of underneath the surface context is this is at the end of the Babylonian reign of the kingdom. And this is where we get the writing on the wall language from. It's the idea of like, this is apparent to everyone, but we're all ignoring it, right? And so God has to like give you the message plainly in front of the sight of all people that like, oh shoot, like we're going down, And so they're holding this great banquet whereas the kingdom is falling all around them because Belshazzar is a weak king. And God says, your time is up. Your time is up. And so this is a beautiful painting. This is magnificent. Like, look at how big, again, how this is being portrayed. This big courtyard with all these people. You've got the tower in the background, right? The ziggurat tower and stuff like that. You have the writing on the wall here showing up in these big letters, right? It says a hand came out of heaven and penned almost in the same way that God with his own hand pens the 10 Commandments. And then you have the menorah on this side. So the point is, he says, how are we going to furnish our feast? Let's go into our stores and take out all of the temple treasures of Jerusalem. And that's how we're going to furnish our feast. We're going to use their goblets and their, all their ritual materials. And then this is what provokes God to say, your time's up. And this is what he writes on the wall. What's it say, guys?
You're done.
It says that somewhere in your
So, yeah, they have to bring Daniel in to read it and interpret it. And it says...
Mene, tekel, some.
Yeah. So the words are numbered, weighed, and divided. And then the message, the interpretation that Daniel gives is he says, God has numbered your days. He has weighed your works, and you have been found wanting. And so he has divided your kingdom and given it to another. And that night, Belshazzar dies, and the kingdom falls into the hands of the Medes and the Persians. So we end today with the head of gold now moving to the arms and chest of silver. The countdown started. We're on our way to the Messiah's coming, right? And is Babylon really gone? I mean, the kingdom fell at Belshazzar's feast, right? The kingdom falls, the writing on the wall, you're done. But like I said, Babylon's not really gone. As we go into the rest of Daniel, as we go into Ezra and Nehemiah, part of the whole point of the rest of these books is to say, I thought that Babylon was going to be over with and the exile is going to be over. And God says, listen, there's a bigger thing going on here. It's not just this one kingdom that needs to fall. The whole statue needs to fall, right? We have to kill the super beast, he says. And so that once that super beast falls, then the kingdom of God will be fully inaugurated. So with that being said, we are going to get into the most important Daniel chapters next week. One more week of the Old Testament. What's it called? Potluck. And then New Testament. Good? Thank you, guys. Sorry we went late.